Hello, everybody, and welcome to another video to discuss the NFL offseason and NFL free agents. This one, we're going to be tackling receivers primarily. There's one tight end involved in this. We're going to kind of combine the two position groups for this one, just because the offseason is about a month away, and I want to try and get as many of these out as I can. So we're discussing receivers and tight ends today, or a tight end. But yeah, again, no comprehensive top 5 list, just some guys I wanted to talk about. So before I dive right in, I want to quickly say subscribe if you're new. Really appreciate it, and leave a like while you at it as well. So to kick things off, we have T. Higgins. I mean, T. Higgins is the biggest name receiver in this free agency class by no stretch of the imagination. And it's a case where since he finds themselves in quite a big of a pickle this offseason, you need to pay T. Higgins, you need to pay someone else we're talking about in a little bit. And Jamar Chase is also up for an extension, and you're looking to pay him as well because he's going on to his 5th-year option. But it's a case where what does Cincy do in this situation? Because they don't have the money to sign. Trey Hendrickson is also there, but they don't have the money to pay everyone. And T. Higgins fully deserves to get paid like to the level he wants to get paid at. He is an incredible receiver for Cincy. When he is on the field, Cincy is a much better team. And pairing him with Jamar Chase was a great duo last year. Well, yes, it didn't lead to much team success. It worked offensively. But it's a case where who are they going to pay? What are they going to pay them and everything? I could see him get franchise tagged once again from Cincy. They're able to do it one more year, but obviously he would not be happy with that and probably just hold out. So is he going to be able to hit the open market? And if so, does his deal look like? Spotrac currently has it at a 4-year, $25.4 million annually, and I do think that is a very good range for T. Higgins. $25 million a year, and maybe even go up to 26, 27, a top paying receiver because he has that talent in him. It has been a minute since he's had a 1,000-yard season, but part of it is due to injuries. If he was healthy last year, he was well on pace for his best season in the NFL. Would have definitely blown past the 1,000-yard mark. He had 10 touchdowns in only 12 games last year. Again, like in a contract year, that is not a terrible season to have, even with the injuries and everything. But it's just since he's not gonna be able to pay him. Since he is not gonna be able to pay him, and most likely we see them franchise tag him in some capacity. Whether it's a restricted tag, which I think would probably be better for both sides, get him on that restricted franchise tag and then trade him, or let a team give you the contract and either match it or let him go for some draft picks. But T. Higgins is definitely the caliber of receiver that they are worth a top tier money. And the injuries haven't shown much when it comes to delaying his production because again he came back from injury last year, missed the first few games. But when he came back, I mean, he's a dominant season with Joe Burrow passing him the ball. So T. Higgins is a big time name and interesting one to keep an eye on. Going to be a mess of a situation as well if Cincy plays it how I think they should. But at the same time, you can't really afford to play it that way. Who knows? We'll see. So next up is going to be Chris Godwin. And his injury that he suffered this past year was devastating and forced him to only play 7 games for a year that was on pace to be a pretty damn good season for Chris Godwin. In only 7 games, he passed the 500-yard mark and he had 5 touchdowns. Again, on pace to have a pretty damn solid season, all things considered. And his highest catch percentage as well as a pro, 82% of the time when the ball was thrown his way this past year, he was making the grab. Is really impressive, and he's going to be a good name as well. There's reports that Tampa is going to look to re-sign him, and I love that if Tampa's able to get it done. The question just becomes, what is the money looking like in that situation? Bocek has 3-year, 22.5 annually for the contract. And if he didn't get injured and he did have another great season and would have had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, I would say for sure. But because of the injury, I would not be surprised if that falls a little bit, maybe closer to 20, maybe below 20, around 19 and a half, 19. It's just the injury is a concern because it's an ankle injury. And you definitely have to keep an eye on it and be wary of it. That's why I think the return to Tampa is a good decision. One, because Tampa would probably be able to get him on some kind of a discount anyway, because of the homegrown discounts that teams do. So and that players are sometimes willing to do for the team that gave a chance on them. So I could see him go back to Tampa just fine. I could see him going to a different team that maybe isn't in the best spot when it comes to winning now. but has a younger quarterback that wants to have a great receiver to pair him with. But in that instance, that's a lot of money to give up to someone who you're just not fully sure if they can bounce back. This will be the second time that Chris Godwin's going to be getting comeback player of the year votes. And again, I do fully believe Chris Godwin can bounce back from this injury just fine. But I'm a little bit more cautious on him than I am Nick Chubb just because of the style of position. But I do still think Godwin deserves the majority of this money that's expected to come his way, just because he has proven himself in this league like that. So I would like to return to Tampa, especially because pairing him with Mike Evans is great. But I also feel like 20 mil is a good range. Return to Tampa's nice. Play with Baker again. I would not be surprised if he sees an offer that gets closer to this expected value or maybe a little bit higher than it, and he's like, I'm going to prove to be a receiver one in this league instead of just being a 1B to Mike Evans. But at the end of the day, I mean, Chris Godwin's going to be able to make plays no matter where he goes and going to earn this money even with the injury. So, yeah, we'll just see again. I would like him to go back to Tampa nonetheless. So next up, one of the two trade deadline acquisitions, DeAndre Hopkins, is a free agent this offseason, and another interesting situation. Earlier in this offseason, and right after the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, I swear I saw a report that he was going to retire. And then I just double checked, and he responded to it saying he's not done yet, so he's expected to play in 2025. But I would not be surprised if it's his last year, if it's his second to last year. You can tell though that he's kind of preparing the process of putting up the cleats. So with that, yeah, a 1 or 2 year deal for DeAndre Hopkins makes sense. It's expected to be roughly 15 a year for that deal. I feel like if it's but that is also expected to be a 1 year deal. If it's a 2 year deal, I see it closer to not 15 mil annually, but maybe closer to, well, like a 25 mil overall deal, so 12 and a half ish. I just feel like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be looking to ring chase and thus return to Kansas City being the best bet. But he also could go to Buffalo or to like a Detroit. And in those instances, well, Buffalo most likely more so. But in those instances, it's going to be a team that's looking to just have a somewhat reliable deep threat receiver. He won't have the same impact that he did before in the earlier stages of his career, and he won't have the same workload unless, I mean, maybe KC gives him a similar workload, but most likely not. But it's just a case where he's an aging vet looking to try and get that ring, as he's had a pretty much Hall of Fame worthy career up to this point and is just missing that ring. So, like the return to KC, could like Buffalo if they decide to part ways with Amari Cooper. And I could also like a Detroit if they're willing to kind of change up their offense a little bit, but I kind of doubt it as well. But DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a fun name, and it feels weird that it's coming up to this point where he's close to retiring. But if he can get that ring before signing things off, I will love it as well. So next receiver is going to be the other trade deadline acquisition, Amari Cooper, said to be a free agent, and him in Buffalo kind of didn't fit how I thought they would at the deadline when they made this trade. They didn't really give Amari Cooper many opportunities. I mean, he had 32 targets in 8 games played for Buffalo. Kind of a disappointing. I'm not sure if that's on Buffalo themselves and not being able to scheme him, or if it's on the fact that they just didn't trust Amari Cooper with the playbook, or what it was. But he just did not show out for Buffalo in the same way I thought he would. He did do a pretty damn good job blocking and was a lot more reliable with his hands in his 8 games with Buffalo than his 6 with Cleveland for the deadline. But it is still just a case of this is drastically a drastically different season than 2023 for Amari Cooper. Going from 1250 yards to 547. It's just I don't fully know what to expect from him anymore. I do think if he returns to Buffalo, we'll see a much bigger target share. And honestly, if he goes anywhere, we'll probably see a bigger target share just because he'll have the offseason to learn the offense and learn the playbook a bit and figure out kind of like, okay, what is my role here? But his time in Buffalo, like this past half season in Buffalo, kind of just felt off. He's expected to get roughly 2 year 14 mil annually, and I think that's a fine deal. Probably would be hoping for a little bit less if I'm a team that's maybe bringing him into ring chase or bringing him in to have that lower target share. But a return to Buffalo at that deal, I mean, I'm not too opposed to it if I'm a Bills fan, which But it's just a case of what is his role going to be going forward. It also feels like he's approaching the tail end of his career, but at the same time, like he clearly has stuff left in the tank because his 2023 was just that good. So I think he just needs a full season in Buffalo. Honestly, if he signs a 1 year deal with Buffalo for roughly 15, 16, and just has to be like, okay, I'm gonna be in Buffalo for at least a full season. Let me actually do what I was supposed to do here, and we could see Buffalo be a really great team next year with that in their back pocket. But Amari Cooper is a very tough book to read right now because of just the kind of disappointment of an impact in Buffalo, as Buffalo was a team that really relied on lesser names to make big time plays for them this year. And they brought in Amari Cooper at the deadline to be that big time superstar that Allen can throw to. And he just never really did. But yeah, that's the story of Amari Cooper. Again, I can see him going back to Buffalo on a 1 year deal. I can see him signing elsewhere for a 2 year deal. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure what his role is going to be on any given team. So now let's talk about the tight end position. I was looking through the tight end free agents because I knew I wanted to combine the position groups in this video. And there's just not a lot of good free agent tight ends, or at least not a lot of noteworthy ones. So we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about the Bengals once again, and Mike Gesicki, who's a free agent this year, at a 1 year 6.7 is the expected value. And here's the thing with Mike Gesicki that we saw with his tenure in New England, his tenure with Cincinnati, and the end of his tenure with Miami. He can be a pretty solid. He can be a pretty solid contested catch tight end, but you can't really ask much else from him. He can, if he catches the ball in open space, he'll be able to run after the catch for like 5 or so yards, but he's not going to really break a lot of tackles. You also don't want to ask him to be a blocking tight end because he just can't really block. That's not his game. His game is to be a red zone, go up and get it, a tight end and a end zone threat. Which Miami was able to utilize him in that role in some capacity, but it's just he has kind of struggled to find a fit elsewhere from the Brian Flores style. So with that, where can he go? I mean, there's not a lot of teams that are screaming the need for tight end right now. But one that is kind of screaming for that need is Cincy, so a return there is fine, but I don't think they will use him properly. It's trying to find a team that will utilize Mike Gesicki in the way he needs to be utilized, and not a lot of teams will do that, as that's kind of just not the nature of the tight end position anymore. So, I mean, if he's to go anywhere, I mean, maybe he goes to Indianapolis and maybe he finds himself a good role there. But it's just really hard to say with just the fact that he lacks in blocking and he lacks in breaking tackles and yard times to catch. That having a tight end, like spending the money on a tight end that really you can only use in the red zone, is not a good idea for a lot of teams. It's definitely not a good idea for a team like Cincinnati, who are trying to help out other portions of this team. So with that, I mean, maybe he goes to the Jets, maybe he goes to the Colts, maybe he goes to the Saints. I just don't know. I'm upset about this because I did really like Gesicki when he was in Miami, but when we brought in Mike McDaniel, it was obvious that just salaries were not going to fit, and Mike Gesicki was going to become kind of a gun for hire type of player, and that has fully been the case. But his future in the NFL, for as much as I really love him and I like him as a player and I like him as a guy, he's a great dude. It's just I don't know what his future holds, and I don't know where it holds. I just don't think it's back in Cincinnati. But with all that being said, thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.